right, listen up, because this could be the moment everything changes in your relationship. If you've ever felt like you're the one always chasing, like you're putting in all the effort while the other person is pulling away, shutting down, or flat out disappearing, this is for you. I'm about to break down exactly what secure, grounded people do to stop that avoidant dance. You know, the one where connection feels amazing one day and cold and distant the next. This isn't about games. It's not manipulation. It's about power, the quiet, unshakable kind that comes from knowing who you are, what you deserve, and how to show up in a way that invites closeness instead of triggering fear. So if you're tired of walking on eggshells, if you want to stop replaying the same cycle with people who run every time things get real, stay with me. Because the moment you understand this, everything shifts. When someone has an avoidant attachment style, they tend to withdraw emotionally or physically when things start to feel too intimate, too close, or too vulnerable. It's not because they don't care, and it's not always about you. It's often rooted in early life experiences where closeness may have felt unsafe, unpredictable, or overwhelming. So when someone starts getting close to them, even if it's healthy and loving, their nervous system reads that closeness as a threat. That's where emotional safety becomes a game changer. Emotionally safe people are not walking on eggshells or shrinking themselves. They're not constantly checking, did I say too much? Did I text too soon? Should I back off now? Emotional safety isn't about never triggering someone. It's about creating a grounded, reliable presence that makes triggering moments less threatening and more manageable. It's about becoming the kind of person who knows how to respond instead of react. And that starts with regulating yourself. Let's be real. When you're dealing with an avoidant partner, their pulling away can trigger your own insecurities. Maybe it sparks anxiety. Maybe it lights up a need to fix, to chase, to prove your worth. But emotional safety means you don't follow that panic. You don't spiral. Instead, you recognize what's happening. Someone is dysregulated and protecting themselves the only way they know how. And rather than take it personally or try to force closeness, you hold steady. That steadiness is magnetic to someone who's used to emotional chaos or inconsistency. When they pull back, you don't punish, you don't protest, you maintain your calm energy, your sense of self, and your respect for their boundaries. That's emotional safety in action. It says, I'm not here to control you, I'm here to connect, and I can do that without pushing, fixing, or proving. That's how secure people keep avoidance from running. They don't chase, they don't freeze, they remain emotionally available, but not emotionally chaotic. Another part of emotional safety is transparency without pressure. Avoidants often feel suffocated when conversations turn intense or overly emotional, especially if it feels like something is being demanded from them. What secure people do differently is that they express themselves clearly, without blame, without drama, and without expecting an immediate emotional return. It might sound like, I noticed you've pulled back a little. That's okay. I just want you to know I'm here if you need space. And I'm also here when you're ready to talk. That's not manipulation. That's honesty paired with calm. And that allows the avoidant person to exhale, to trust that they're not about to be cornered or overwhelmed. The moment someone starts to feel safe, not judged, not pushed, not analyzed, they can start to lower their walls. It takes time. You don't crack through avoidance with intensity or emotional flooding. You ease into it with consistency, with calm energy, and with the unspoken message. You don't have to run. I'm not a threat. I'm not going to abandon myself trying to hold on to you, but I also won't reject you just because you need space. And let's be clear, emotional safety is not about tolerating disrespect or waiting around indefinitely. It's about showing up in a grounded way while also honoring your own limits. You can be calm and clear while also saying, I need connection that feels mutual. I respect your pace, but I also need to be honest about what I want. That balance, that mature self-awareness, is what makes a secure person feel like home instead of a trap. So emotional safety is not a tactic. It's a way of being. It's how secure people live in relationships. They're not chasing, they're inviting, they're not demanding, they're expressing, they're not controlling, they're connecting. And when you bring that energy into your relationships, it changes the whole dynamic. Avoidance stops seeing intimacy as something they need to escape and start seeing it as something that can actually feel good, even safe. When people think of love or connection, they often confuse emotional intensity with emotional depth. It's easy to get caught up in the high of intense conversations, passionate moments, dramatic expressions of love, or the roller coaster of on-again, off-again dynamics. But here's the truth. What actually creates lasting connection, especially with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, isn't intensity, it's consistency. Consistency doesn't look flashy. It doesn't come with emotional fireworks. But it's the very thing that rewires the nervous system of someone who's used to unpredictability. Avoidance often grew up in environments where closeness came with strings attached, where love felt conditional or attention was inconsistent. That creates a deep-seated belief that intimacy is unstable or even unsafe. So when someone shows up with intense feelings 1 minute, then pulls away the next, it reinforces everything they already fear, that connection isn't reliable, that it will hurt, and that they have to protect themselves. What secure people do differently is they show up the same way over time. Their messages aren't confusing. Their energy isn't hot one day and cold the next. They don't go silent to punish, and they don't overwhelm someone just to feel close. They know that real intimacy is built in the mundane, not the extreme. It's in the small daily actions. A simple check-in, a steady tone, a consistent emotional presence. That's what teaches someone slowly, but powerfully, that it's safe to stay. This doesn't mean being perfect. It means being reliable. If you say you'll call, you do. If you say you're okay with space, you don't secretly resent it. If something bothers you, you speak it gently and directly, instead of holding it in and letting it explode later. That steadiness starts to counteract the deep fear avoidants carry. That relationships always end in chaos, disappointment, or loss of self. Now here's where it gets even more powerful. When you're consistent, you remove the drama. And when there's no drama, there's no fuel for avoidance. Avoidants often unconsciously expect the other shoe to drop. They expect emotional chaos. They expect pressure. So when they don't get it, when you remain calm, kind, and clear, they start to relax. Not immediately and not without their own process. But slowly their system stops being on high alert. You're not confirming their fear. You're contradicting it every day with every consistent word and action. Consistency also includes emotional regulation. That means not riding your own emotional highs and lows to extremes. When you feel rejected, triggered, or confused, you don't lash out or shut down. You take a breath. You respond thoughtfully. That doesn't mean you hide your feelings. It means you express them in a steady way. I'm feeling a little disconnected, and I'd love to talk when you're ready, is very different from why do you always do this? I can't keep doing this with you. The latter may feel more real in the moment, but the former is what builds trust. Avoidants don't hate connection. They just don't trust it. And the only thing that rebuilds that trust is time and consistency. Think of it like this. Each consistent interaction is a brick. You're building a foundation. One brick doesn't mean much on its own, but when you show up with the same energy, same boundaries, same kindness, and same honesty, day after day, that wall of protection they've built around themselves starts to shift. Not because you knocked it down, but because they finally feel safe enough to let it open from the inside. So the next time you're tempted to prove yourself with a grand gesture or match someone's emotional distance with your own pause, ask yourself, what would it look like to be consistent instead of reactive right now? That's the power move. That's how you stop being part of the chaos and start being the calm. Consistency may not always be exciting, but it's magnetic. It's trustworthy. And when it comes to keeping an avoidant partner from running, it's the one thing that truly makes them want to stay. One of the biggest misconceptions people have about boundaries is that they're walls meant to keep people out. But the truth is, healthy boundaries are invitations. They create clarity, safety, and structure. 3 things avoidantly attached people deeply need but rarely know how to ask for. When someone doesn't have strong internal boundaries, it often leads to emotional chaos. They overgive, overexplain, overstay, and then feel resentful or abandoned when things don't go the way they hoped. That kind of energy overwhelms avoidants who are already on high alert for anything that might feel like a threat to their autonomy. But when you set boundaries with calm confidence, you send a very different message. You're allowed to be you, and I'm allowed to be me. I don't need to control you to feel okay, and I won't let you control me either. Avoidant individuals tend to feel suffocated by emotional demands, even when those demands are subtle. So if you're constantly adjusting who you are in order to get them to stay, you're actually feeding into their fears. You're confirming the idea that closeness comes at a cost. Boundaries flip that script. When you say, I care about you, but I won't chase you, or I respect your space, but I also need communication, you're showing them something they rarely see, a person who honors both connection and dependence. That's what makes secure people feel different. They're not trying to merge or control. They're not begging. They're simply stating calmly and clearly what they need and what they won't tolerate. This doesn't just help the avoidant person, it helps you. Because without boundaries, you lose yourself. You become overly focused on what the other person wants, how they feel, what they're doing, and whether they're pulling away. That's exhausting. And it creates a dynamic where the avoidant partner becomes the emotional center of the relationship, while you shrink, twist, and contort just to keep things from falling apart. That's not love. That's survival. Boundaries are how you shift out of survival mode and back into self-respect. Here's the thing. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They're not threats. They're not about changing the other person. They're about defining your own edges, what's okay with you, what's not, and how you'll respond when those lines are crossed. For example, you might say, if you need space, that's okay, but I need to know that we'll touch base within a few days. Otherwise, it feels like disconnection to me. That's not a demand. That's clarity. And it gives the avoidant person a structure they can actually work with. Without that, they're left guessing, and avoidants do not thrive in ambiguity. They withdraw when things feel messy, unspoken, or emotionally charged. Boundaries also mean letting people sit with the consequences of their behavior without trying to rescue or soften the blow. If someone disappears for days without communication, and you respond with more effort, texting again, checking in, trying to bridge the gap, you're training them to expect closeness without responsibility. But when you step back, hold your boundary and say, this isn't how I do connection. You shift the dynamic. You stop rewarding avoidance. You stop enabling emotional distance. And you invite them calmly but firmly to rise to the level of connection you're capable of offering. This takes courage. It's much easier to bend than to hold your ground, especially when you care deeply about someone. But boundaries are not about being cold. They're about being clear. They're about saying, I want connection, not confusion. I want intimacy, not guessing games. I want emotional availability, not hot and cold patterns. And you can say that without raising your voice, without blaming, and without apologizing. When you lead with boundaries that come from self-respect, not fear, you become deeply attractive to avoidant partners, not because you're catering to their patterns, but because you're modeling something they may have never experienced. A relationship where closeness doesn't require losing yourself. That's what creates the possibility for real connection, not just temporary attraction. You stop reinforcing their fears and instead show them what it looks like to love with strength, clarity, and calm. Boundaries, when done right, don't push people away. They create the container where true closeness can finally happen. A major turning point in dealing with avoidant individuals, whether it's in romantic relationships, friendships, or even family, is realizing that you can't lead with emotional intensity if you want true connection. What actually works is leading with calm, not control. That shift in energy changes everything. People with avoidant tendencies are hypersensitive to any hint of emotional pressure or control. They're wired to detect it, even when it's subtle. If they feel like you're trying to force closeness, fix their discomfort, or manage their feelings for them, their instinct will be to back away, create space, or shut down. That's how they protect themselves. But when you lead with calm, you're saying something completely different without even using words. You're safe. I'm not here to control you. I'm here to connect, not to take over. This calm presence is incredibly powerful. It creates a kind of emotional breathing room. Think of it like this. The more you try to control someone's emotions, reactions, or timelines, the more they feel the need to defend their independence. But when you stop trying to manage them and start managing yourself, you give the relationship space to breathe. Calm doesn't mean you're detached or indifferent. It means you're grounded in your own energy. You're not chasing, you're not proving, you're not trying to get a certain reaction. You're just being real, being steady, and showing up with emotional maturity. Avoidants often interpret emotional urgency as danger. Even if you're coming from a loving place, if your energy is frantic, like you're trying to fix the relationship every time there's distance, they'll feel overwhelmed. The calm person, on the other hand, holds space for what they don't panic at the first sign of withdrawal. They don't rush into deep conversations just to relieve their own anxiety. They understand that connection can deepen slowly and that emotional regulation is a form of leadership in a relationship. One of the most attractive things to an avoidant person, though they may not consciously realize it, is someone who doesn't try to fix them. Someone who can sit in silence without making it awkward. Someone who doesn't immediately take their emotional distance personally. That doesn't mean you don't notice or care. It means you don't react impulsively. You might say, I noticed you've been quieter lately. I'm here when you're ready to talk. That's calm. That's leadership. That's security in action. It shows that you're not emotionally dependent on their reactions to feel okay about yourself. And that kind of stability is deeply reassuring, even if it takes time for them to recognize it. Leading with calm also means being okay with your own boundaries and your own needs without turning them into weapons. For example, you might express, I value emotional openness, and I'd like to be in a relationship where we can talk about how we feel. But you're not demanding it in a way that comes from panic. You're simply sharing your truth. That calm tone makes your boundary easier to hear and far more likely to be respected. When people feel they have the freedom to choose how they show up rather than being emotionally coerced, they often rise to meet you in ways they never have before. Control, on the other hand, usually shows up in the form of over-explaining, guilt-tripping, or subtle manipulation. And even if it's not intentional, avoidants pick up on it fast. They've spent years learning how to read the room for emotional pressure. So when your energy says you better respond how I want you to or I feel unsafe, they retreat. But when your energy says you can be where you are and I'll be where I am and we'll meet when we're both ready, they feel something unfamiliar, freedom and connection at the same time. The calm approach also keeps you grounded. You don't have to chase someone else's emotional availability when you're anchored in your own. You don't have to control every outcome when you trust yourself to handle whatever happens. And that kind of emotional steadiness doesn't just help avoidance feel safer, it makes you feel stronger, clearer, and more aligned with the kind of relationship you actually want. So, no, calm doesn't mean passive. It means powerful. It means you're leading with your energy, not your fear. It means you're inviting someone to connect from a place of choice, not pressure. That's what makes people stop running. Not because they're trapped, but because they finally feel safe enough to stay. One of the most misunderstood dynamics in relationships, especially with someone who has avoidant tendencies, is the difference between staying and chasing. It's tempting to think that if you just love harder, show more affection, or explain your feelings better, the other person will finally let down their walls and open up. But that's not how it works with avoidant individuals. Chasing them doesn't create connection. It creates pressure. It makes them feel like they're being cornered, like their independence is at risk. And when they feel that, they do what they've always done. They pull away. The difference between staying and chasing is subtle, but it's everything. Chasing is reactive. It's fueled by anxiety, by a fear of abandonment, by the desperate need to fix something that feels like it's slipping away. It often looks like sending another text to clarify what you meant, trying to force a conversation they're not ready to have, or bending over backwards to prove you're worth staying for. But all of that energy, even if it comes from love, can feel overwhelming to someone who is avoidantly attached, because deep down they don't trust that intimacy will come without a cost. So the more you push, the more you confirm their fear that connection means losing control. Staying, on the other hand, is about presence, not pressure. It's rooted in self-respect and emotional regulation. It means you remain emotionally available without overextending yourself. You're not walking away in anger or slamming doors to protect your ego. You're also not rushing in to rescue the relationship every time it feels shaky. You're simply showing up calm, grounded, and honest about your needs. You're willing to be there, but not at the expense of your dignity or well-being. Avoidants aren't scared of love. They're scared of what love has felt like in the past. Often it felt like obligation, overwhelm, or emotional chaos. So when they meet someone who can stay without chasing, they experience something new. It doesn't feel threatening. It doesn't feel like they're being swallowed whole. It feels steady. It feels safe. And safety for someone with avoidant wiring is the key to connection. Here's what this looks like in real life. Let's say they go quiet or distant after a particularly vulnerable moment. The anxious part of you wants to react. You want to check in, ask what's wrong, try to fix it. But if you're staying, not chasing, you resist that urge. You might send one calm message that says, I'm here if you want to talk. And then you leave space. You don't flood their inbox. You don't panic. You regulate yourself. That silence becomes a powerful signal. It tells them you care, but you're not going to force closeness. That alone can be disarming because it shows you're emotionally solid, not emotionally dependent. Staying also means staying aligned with your values. It means not abandoning yourself to keep someone else comfortable. If you need communication, you own that. If you need clarity about where things are going, you ask for it calmly. And if you don't get it, you're willing to walk away. Not as a threat, but as a self-respecting decision. Because staying isn't about endlessly waiting for someone to meet you halfway. It's about being clear about your needs while giving them the space to meet you without pressure. The irony is, the more you chase, the less they want to connect. But the more you stay calm, consistent, grounded, the more they start to trust that you're not going to invade their space or try to change them. You're offering connection without control. That's what starts to break down their defenses. Not intensity, not emotional persuasion, just quiet, steady presence. This is not easy. It takes a strong sense of self. It takes the ability to sit with discomfort, to tolerate uncertainty, and to trust that if someone is capable of real connection, they'll eventually meet you there. And if they don't, you'll be okay, because you never abandoned yourself chasing someone who couldn't stay. So staying without chasing is the ultimate paradox. It feels like you're doing less, but it's actually the most powerful move you can make. It communicates security, self-respect, and emotional maturity. And in a world full of people either clinging too hard or pulling too far away, being the one who can simply stay without fear, without pressure, is what changes the entire dynamic. It invites connection that's real, lasting, and free. Here's the truth. Most people miss. Making an avoidant stop running isn't about chasing them, fixing them, or proving your worth. It's about becoming the calm, grounded presence they didn't know they could trust. It's about showing up with consistency, setting clear boundaries, leading with emotional stability, and staying without chasing. When you stop trying to control the outcome and start embodying emotional security, everything shifts. You create a safe space, not just for them, but for yourself. Because real connection doesn't come from pressure. It comes from choice. And when you give someone the freedom to stay without fear, without manipulation, and without losing yourself in the process, that's when they finally see they're not being trapped. They're being invited. And that's what makes them want to stay.